Sometimes the hardest story you will ever tell is the story you whisper to yourself in the quiet of the night. The story about who you are, what you are worth, and whether or not you are enough. For so many of us, that story has been rewritten 1,000 times by the voices of other people, by the sting of rejection, by the weight of comparison, and by the silence of shame. We carry these narratives inside us like heavy books we never chose to read, but somehow keep memorizing, page after page. And yet, here is the truth that so often gets buried beneath those pages. The story of your life does not need to be edited by anyone else's opinion. It belongs to you. It always has. And when you dare to own it, every messy, imperfect, beautiful chapter, something extraordinary happens. You stop surviving someone else's version of you, and you start living your own truth. We live in a world that constantly tells us who we should be. Smile more, be tougher, don't be too loud, don't be too quiet, achieve more, fail less. And in this endless tug of war between who we are and who we think we should be, we forget the most essential thing, that the only person who can define us is ourselves. Self-acceptance is not about ignoring your flaws or pretending your scars don't exist. It's about looking at every part of your story, the victories, the heartbreaks, the shame, the resilience, and saying, "This is me. I am not broken. I am whole." But owning your story is not easy. It requires courage to face the parts of yourself you've been running from. It demands honesty when denial feels safer. It asks you to stand tall when every instinct tells you to shrink. And yet, the moment you decide to own your story, the chains of other people's expectations begin to loosen. The fear of not being enough begins to fade. The shame that once held you hostage begins to lose its power. Think about it. What if the very thing you've been hiding is the thing that could heal you? What if your greatest strength lies not in your perfection but in your willingness to be real? We spend so much of our lives trying to edit ourselves into the version we think will be loved, accepted, and celebrated. But people are not moved by perfection. They are moved by truth. And the most powerful truth you can ever share is the truth of who you are. Self-acceptance changes everything, because it shifts the way you see the world and the way the world sees you. When you stop fighting yourself, you free up all that energy to actually live, to love, to create, to connect. You stop asking, "Am I enough?" And you start saying, "I am enough." That shift might sound small, but it is revolutionary. It is the difference between a life lived in fear and a life lived in freedom. So today, I want you to remember this. Your story is not your shame. It is your strength. Your scars are not evidence of your weakness. They are proof of your survival. And your imperfections are not reasons to hide. They are reasons to shine. You don't need to rewrite your story to make it acceptable to the world. You need to own it, embrace it, and let it become the source of your courage. Because the moment you choose to own your story, everything begins to change. We all carry parts of ourselves we wish we could hide. Maybe it's the mistakes we've made, the failures that haunt us, or the insecurities that whisper in the back of our minds when no one else is listening. And because those parts feel too heavy, too messy, too complicated, we try to push them down, cover them up, or pretend they don't exist. We wear masks, smiles when we are hurting, confidence when we are crumbling, perfection when we are terrified of being seen as ordinary. The world around us has taught us that showing our true selves is risky, that vulnerability is dangerous, and that imperfection is unacceptable. So we learn the art of self-denial, and we convince ourselves that if we can just hold the mask in place long enough, maybe no one will notice what's underneath. But deep down, we notice, and it hurts. There is a quiet exhaustion that comes with hiding. There is a deep loneliness that grows when we feel unseen, not because others can't see us, but because we refuse to let them. The struggle with self-acceptance is not just about facing the judgment of the world. It's about facing the judgment we place on ourselves every single day. It's about those moments when you look in the mirror and only see flaws. It's about those times when you replay your past like a broken record, punishing yourself for things you cannot change. It's about the way shame creeps in and convinces you that you are not enough, not worthy, not lovable. We think if we can edit out the messy parts of our story, then maybe we will finally feel whole. But the truth is, wholeness does not come from cutting pieces of yourself away. Wholeness comes from embracing every part of who you are. Yet, most of us spend years, sometimes decades, avoiding that truth. We fight ourselves because we believe that if we admit to our struggles, we will lose respect, love, or connection. Ironically, the very thing we are desperate for, connection, is impossible without honesty. Pretending is a wall, and while it may protect you from rejection, it also keeps you from intimacy, belonging, and peace. I know how tempting it is to believe that self-acceptance will come once you fix yourself, once you're thinner, once you're stronger, once you've achieved more, once you've healed every wound and erased every mistake. But that's the trap. The belief that you must earn your worthiness. Self-acceptance is not something you achieve at the end of perfection. It's something you choose in the middle of imperfection. It's saying, I am worthy now, not someday. I am enough now, not when I meet everyone's expectations. That choice is terrifying because it means stepping into the world as you are, not as you wish you were. It means facing the risk that some people will reject you. And yes, some will. But the greater risk is rejecting yourself for a lifetime and never truly living. The struggle with self-acceptance is universal. Every single one of us wrestles with shame, fear, and doubt. But that struggle does not make you broken. It makes you human. The goal is not to erase the struggle, but to walk through it with courage, to look at yourself, scars and all, and say, I am still worthy of love. I am still worthy of joy. I am still enough. Because here's the truth. No one else can fight that battle for you. No one else can hand you self-acceptance wrapped in a bow. It is a daily decision, a daily act of courage, and a daily reminder that your story in all its complexity is still worth owning. And yes, it will be hard. It will take practice. It will take unlearning years of shame and replacing it with compassion. But the fight is worth it. Because when you finally begin to accept yourself, the weight of the masks, the exhaustion of pretending, and the loneliness of hiding start to lift. You begin to feel lighter. You begin to feel free. You begin to see yourself not as a collection of flaws, but as a whole, resilient, beautiful human being. And that is where transformation begins. There is a cost to pretending. There is a cost to denial, and the truth is, it is far heavier than the weight of honesty. When we deny parts of ourselves, our pain, our failures, our flaws, we may think we are protecting ourselves from judgment or rejection. But what we are really doing is building a prison out of our own silence. We lock away the pieces of our story we are afraid for others to see, and then we wonder why we feel trapped, suffocated, and disconnected. Denial is a slow erosion of the soul. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins with little compromises, brushing off your feelings, laughing when you want to cry, nodding yes when your heart is screaming no. At first, it feels like survival. You tell yourself, I'm fine, I can handle it. It doesn't matter. But with each moment of denial, a small part of you goes unheard, unseen, unacknowledged. And over time, those small silences turn into an ache, so deep it becomes hard to remember who you truly are beneath the performance. The cost of denial shows up in exhaustion, because it is exhausting to constantly wear a mask. It is exhausting to wake up every day and wonder, what version of myself do I need to be today to be accepted? It drains your spirit to always measure yourself against impossible standards, to hold your breath in fear that the real you will slip out. And in that exhaustion, joy becomes harder to reach, creativity feels stifled, and life begins to lose its color. The cost also shows up in relationships. When you deny your truth, the people around you never really know you. They only know the version you allow them to see. And even if they love that version, you can't fully receive their love, because deep down you know it's not the whole you they're loving. That kind of distance creates loneliness, even in crowded rooms, even in relationships that should feel safe. You can't feel fully connected when you're hiding behind walls. Denial becomes the barrier that blocks intimacy, belonging, and authenticity. And then there is the cost to your spirit. When you live in denial, you silence your own voice. You dim your own light. You begin to believe that you are only as good as the role you play, the image you project, the mask you wear. Over time, the gap between who you really are and who you pretend to be grows wider, and that gap becomes a chasm filled with shame. The longer you deny yourself, the harder it becomes to believe you are worthy of acceptance at all. It's like starving your soul and then wondering why you feel so empty. Here's the paradox. We deny ourselves to avoid pain, but denial creates more pain. We deny ourselves to avoid rejection, but denial breeds disconnection. We deny ourselves to appear strong, but denial makes us weaker inside. The cost is always greater than the illusion of safety we think we've gained. And yet, many of us keep paying that cost for years because facing the truth feels scarier than living in the lie. But the truth, no matter how heavy, will always set you freer than denial ever will. Owning your story may feel terrifying, but it is the only way to stop living as a stranger in your own life. When you deny your story, you don't just lose your past, you lose your present and your future too. You cut yourself off from the possibility of growth, healing, and connection. But when you own your story, you take back your power. You stop letting shame write your narrative, and you begin to write it yourself. The cost of denial is too high. It steals your peace. It drains your joy. It keeps you locked in cycles of shame and fear. But the moment you choose acceptance, the weight begins to lift. The air feels lighter. Life feels more honest. And you begin to discover that the freedom of being fully yourself is worth far more than the false comfort of denial. There is a moment, often small and quiet, when self-acceptance first begins to take root. It might happen when you are tired of carrying the mask, tired of running from yourself, tired of pretending. It might happen in a conversation with someone who finally sees you, or in a moment of silence when you realize you can no longer live a divided life. Whatever the moment looks like, it always feels the same. A breath you didn't know you were holding finally releases. A weight you didn't know you carried finally lifts. That is the beginning of freedom. The freedom of self-acceptance is not about becoming perfect. It's about letting go of the need to be. It's the freedom to wake up in the morning and not rehearse the version of yourself you think the world will applaud. It's the freedom to laugh loudly without worrying if someone thinks you're too much. It's the freedom to speak your truth, even when your voice shakes, because you know that silence costs more than rejection ever will. Self-acceptance is not a finish line you cross when you finally fix yourself. It is a doorway you walk through when you finally choose to embrace yourself as you are. When you own your story, no one else can weaponize it against you. The things you once hid, the failures, the heartbreaks, the flaws, lose their power to shame you. They transform from secrets into testimonies, from wounds into wisdom. You begin to see that the very parts of yourself you were once ashamed of are the parts that connect you most deeply to others. Because when you are honest about your own struggles, you give others permission to be honest about theirs. That is the hidden gift of self-acceptance. It doesn't just set you free. It creates freedom all around you. There is also a deep peace that comes with owning your story. You no longer waste energy comparing yourself to everyone else or trying to fit into molds that were never made for you. You stop chasing approval like a finish line that keeps moving further away. Instead, you anchor yourself in the truth that you are already enough. And from that place of groundedness, life begins to expand. You take risks you were once too afraid to take. You dream bigger, love deeper, and show up braver. Not because you know you'll succeed, but because you're no longer terrified of failing. Failure no longer defines you because you've already embraced yourself beyond it. The freedom of self-acceptance also transforms the way you relate to others. When you stop hiding, you allow people to truly know you. That authenticity draws in real connection, the kind that isn't based on performance, but on presence. The kind of love that doesn't require you to shrink or to strive, but allows you to be seen in your wholeness. And here's the paradox. The acceptance you were chasing from others begins to find you naturally. Once you stop chasing and start living authentically. Freedom doesn't mean life becomes perfect. You will still stumble, still make mistakes, still face rejection at times. But the difference is that those moments no longer crush you. They no longer define your worth. Instead, they become part of your story, and because you own that story, you can carry it without fear. You no longer need to outrun your imperfections, because you have learned to embrace them as part of your humanity. That is what true freedom feels like. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of peace in the middle of it. Imagine a life where you no longer apologize for existing, no longer trade your authenticity for approval, no longer silence your voice to keep the peace. Imagine waking up each day with the quiet confidence that you are allowed to take up space, to speak your truth, to be fully yourself. That is the life self-acceptance offers. That is the freedom waiting for you when you choose to own your story, and it is worth everything. Authenticity sounds beautiful when we talk about it, but living it is one of the bravest things you will ever do, because being authentic means choosing courage over comfort, truth over approval, and integrity over image. It means walking into rooms where people may not understand you, may not accept you, and still saying, this is who I am. That kind of courage is not loud or flashy. It is often quiet, steady, and deeply vulnerable. But it is the kind of courage that changes everything. To live authentically, you must be willing to disappoint others before you disappoint yourself. That is hard, because so many of us are wired to please, to adapt, to shapeshift into whatever version of ourselves will keep the peace. We say yes when our hearts say no. We stay silent when our souls beg us to speak. We hide parts of ourselves because we fear they won't be lovable. And every time we do, we betray ourselves a little more. Authenticity asks us to stop betraying ourselves for the comfort of others. It asks us to stand in the truth of who we are, even if our voice trembles, even if our hands shake, even if not everyone claps when we show up. The courage to live authentically also means embracing vulnerability as strength. For too long, we have been told that vulnerability is weakness, that showing emotions or admitting struggles makes us fragile. But the truth is, vulnerability is the birthplace of connection, creativity, and love. It is the doorway to intimacy and the bridge to belonging. When you dare to be vulnerable, to say, I'm not okay, or this is who I am, or I need help, you risk rejection, yes, but you also create the possibility of real connection, the kind that nourishes your soul instead of draining it. Living authentically means trading the illusion of perfection for the reality of connection. Courage does not mean you won't be afraid. In fact, if you are not afraid, it's probably not courage at all. Courage is feeling the fear and showing up anyway. It's standing in your truth when it would be easier to hide. It's choosing to speak up when silence would protect you. It's saying, I am enough in a world that constantly tells you you're not. Authentic living is not about the absence of fear, but about refusing to let fear make your choices for you. And here's the thing, when you live authentically, you give others permission to do the same. Your courage becomes contagious. Your willingness to show up as you are lights the way for others who have been hiding. Every time you choose to be real, you are not just freeing yourself, you are creating a ripple effect of freedom around you. And in a world full of masks, that kind of authenticity is revolutionary. But let's be honest, authenticity will cost you. It may cost you approval. It may cost you relationships that were only built on a version of you that wasn't true. It may cost you comfort, because growth always does. But it will also give you back your life. And that is a trade worth making. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to look back and realize you lived someone else's story. You want to look back and know, with every fiber of your being, that you lived your truth, your way, your life. The courage to live authentically is not a one-time choice. It is a daily practice. Some days you will do it boldly, and some days you will stumble. But every time you return to yourself, every time you choose truth over pretending, you strengthen that courage a little more. And over time, it becomes less about fear and more about freedom. Less about performance and more about presence. Less about proving and more about simply being. Living authentically is not the easiest path, but it is the only path that leads to real fulfillment. It is the only path that allows you to breathe deeply, love fully, and live freely. So yes, it takes courage, but courage is not about never falling. Courage is about rising, again and again, as your truest self. And when you do, everything changes, not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. You are finally enough, exactly as you are. There comes a moment in every life when we have to decide, will I keep running from my story, or will I finally turn around and embrace it? Will I let shame continue to write the chapters of my life, or will I take back the pen and write them myself? That decision is not a single event. It is a practice, a commitment, a way of living, and it is one of the most powerful choices you will ever make. Owning your story is not about rewriting your past. It is about reclaiming it. It is about looking at the pain, the mistakes, the heartbreaks, and saying, yes, this is part of me, but it does not define all of me. It is about refusing to let the worst chapters of your life silence the rest of the book. Because your story is not only the places where you have been broken, it is also the places where you have healed. It is not only about the mistakes you've made, it is also about the lessons you've learned. It is not only about the struggles you've faced, it is also about the resilience that carried you through them. When you own your story, you transform shame into strength. You begin to see that the very parts of yourself you once hid in the dark are the very parts that make you relatable, human, and brave. And here's the truth: people are not moved by your perfection, they are moved by your authenticity. The world does not need another polished mask. It needs the real, unfiltered, unedited version of you, because that is where connection happens. That is where healing begins. That is where change becomes possible. Think of the people you admire most, the people who have touched your life in deep and lasting ways. Were they perfect? No. They were real, they were honest, they were willing to share their scars, not just their trophies. That is what made them powerful, and that same power lives inside you. You don't have to wait until you have it all figured out. You don't have to wait until you're flawless. You don't have to wait until you're enough. Because you already are. Right now, as you are, you have a story worth owning. The courage to own your story will not just change how you see yourself, it will change how you see the world. When you accept yourself, you begin to extend that acceptance to others. When you stop hiding your imperfections, you create space for others to embrace theirs. Your bravery becomes an invitation for others to step into their own. That is how change ripples through communities, through families, through lives, one person at a time, choosing to live authentically. So let me leave you with this. Your story is not your shame. Your story is your strength. Every chapter, every scar, every stumble has shaped you into who you are today. Do not run from it. Do not deny it. Do not let anyone else write it for you. Stand tall in it, own it, because when you do, you will discover a freedom that denial can never give you. You will discover a peace that pretending can never provide. You will discover a courage that approval can never replace. The world doesn't need a perfect version of you. It needs the true version of you. The one who has fallen and risen, the one who has broken and healed, the one who is still learning, still growing, still showing up. That is your power. That is your gift. That is your story. So go ahead, own it, live it, and watch how everything begins to change.